There was this moment that I'll never forget where I noticed my grandma's big toe turn black. And it was the most terrifying moment because I knew what that could mean. At the time, my only thought was that it would mean that she would have to amputate her leg. But we never got that chance because it was 2 weeks from that moment that she was home on hospice care and passing away.
What compels somebody to take their health to the next level and then the next level after that? For a lot of us, it's a very personal journey. And we have somebody here today who is going to share theirs with us, hopefully inspire us to take our health to the next level and that next level after that as well. And we're going to be getting into the basics of eating a raw vegan diet. With that, we welcome the incomparable Samantha Salmon to the program. Samantha, so good to see you.
Thank you. I love that intro. Incomparable. I like it.
Well, that's who you are. I mean, I've gotten the opportunity over the past year or so to get to really know you and have many extraordinary conversations with you. And your story is touching, it's heartwarming, and the way that you've kind of made lemonade out of lemons and are now helping thousands of people, that is just a Herculean effort that is not lost on me. So thank you for making the time, Samantha.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, let's talk about this. You today eat a raw vegan diet. Obviously was not always the case. What led you to this path?
Yeah, I eat a high raw vegan diet. And basically what that means is the majority of the calories that I consume on a daily basis come from raw foods. And how I ended up on this journey, I was raised in a home, in a Jamaican household, with my parents, my brother, and my grandmother. And my grandmother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when I was pretty young, but still, conscious enough to have conversations. So probably like, let's say around 5, 6, 7, around there. And in the beginning of her journey, my mom had to basically learn how to nourish her, right? So she had to meet with a nutritionist or a dietitian, I'm not sure, one of those professions, to get the information on how to feed my grandma now that she was type 2 diabetic. And since my mom, she's not the type of person to make a different meal for every person in the house, right? It's just one big pot of food for everyone. So whatever dietary changes she needed to make for my grandmother, we were all going on this change. So all of our diets pretty much changed to fit at that time what the medical establishment was saying type 2 diabetics needed to eat. So we were doing that for a long time, for, at least a decade. And there was this moment that I'll never forget where I noticed my grandma's big toe turn black. And it was the most terrifying moment because I knew what that could mean. At the time, my only thought was that it would mean that she would have to amputate her leg. But we never got that chance because it was 2 weeks from that moment that she was home on hospice care and passing away. While she was home on hospice care, she was in a lot of pain. And, I remember her screaming out in pain that the catheter was burning her, and this is someone I loved so dearly. And we did a lot of work to, keep her alive, keep her well, following all the protocols that we had from, the doctors and whatnot on the foods that she was supposed to eat, the medication and all this stuff. And it seemed at that time like none of that did anything because, she got to this point. And it was really a traumatic moment for me to lose her. It's like losing a parent, my first parent. And it was just, it was really painful. But in that moment, watching her go through this, watching someone I admired and respected and loved so much go through this, I realized that food is not worth it. And it just basically scared me straight. So the time she passed away was my freshman year of college. Fast forward now, my senior year of college, I get married, moved to the Bay Area, and it was my husband that exposed me to veganism. And specifically, this one video I remember that was really impactful was this guy doing a lecture on what makes humans different from carnivores. And he's talking about the fact that we don't have canines, right? We can't just put our teeth into the flesh of an animal and just eat it raw. We get sick when we eat raw meat, raw blood, right? We don't even have the tools physically in our teeth for that. Our intestines are long and windy, and a carnivore's intestine is pretty straight and short, So the meat goes in and it goes out. For us, it gets stuck in these crevices, it calcifies, and this is what's causing cancer and all of this stuff. So everything this guy was saying, made a lot of sense to me. And so given what I saw and witnessed with my grandma, what food could do and how much it could hurt, I was an easy sell. And then around that time too, I found Dr. Neil Barnard's book, How to Reverse Type 2 Diabetes, and that was it. I had my last meal with meat. There was a specific thing at Whole Foods I was getting all the time, these buffalo hot wings at Whole Foods. And I had this last ceremonial meal with that. It took twice as long to eat that than ever before, because I knew that was going to be the last time. And that was the last time. I was 2 weeks as a vegetarian and then have been vegan ever since. That was 15 years ago. And at that time, I was in the Bay Area. So I was walking distance from Whole Foods, walking distance from Trader Joe's. Cafe Gratitude was nearby. And at the time, this is 2008, right? So at the time, Cafe Gratitude was all raw. And I would go there and have an amazing time eating amazing food. And my circle of, I wouldn't even call them friends because I was only in the Bay Area for about 2.5 years, but I was meeting people and starting to build community outside of work. And these folks were into that way of eating as well. At their workshops I would go to, and I was picking up books, Annie Fio's raw book, and this woman from Pure Food and Wine, I can't remember her name, Sarma. They did a whole series on her actually on Netflix recently. But picking up these raw books and experimenting, getting into green smoothies and things of that nature. And, everything, it just all made sense. And I felt great. I felt good. And yeah, that's how I got into veganism. That's how I got into raw veganism. I've been high raw vegan for the past 15 years. I had a raw vegan eatery in Chicago for 6 years. And at the beginning of that journey, I was like 95% raw. And the great thing about being high raw in particular is that you have more flexibility. So like when it comes to Thanksgiving and Christmas, I just go to my family's house. I don't have to, tell them to make raw vegan meals or teach them. Because when you say raw to most people, they're like, what? They're thinking raw meat, which is not what we're doing. It's a stretch for a lot of people, but they understand at least foods without meat, dairy, eggs, right? And so it's a lot easier and a lot more flexible as a high raw vegan.
Gotcha. All right. So for those who are still a little bit confused by that, so basically like a high raw vegan is like that's predominantly raw vegan, correct? Like that's just another way of saying that that's a synonym. So is there anything like a low raw vegan? I'm sure somebody out there is wondering that. Honestly, that's where my simplistic mind went initially as well.
Yeah, well, in the vegan world, there's a lot of different ways to eat, right? And so that's kind of like what I do as a coach. As a coach, we learn all these different dietary practices that are out there, and we help folks find what works best for them. I say focus in the plant-based world because plant foods are the healthiest foods. That's where we're getting our nutrients. That's where the animals get its nutrients. And from my perspective, why would we want to get nutrients secondhand? We should be getting them firsthand, right? In the vegan world, there's a lot of different ways to eat. You have vegans that eat heavily processed foods, or they're eating a lot of they're eating cooked food. So that could look like oatmeal for breakfast, a black bean burger for lunch, and a vegan pizza for dinner, right? As a high raw vegan, and folks have different ways they, do this. Some do raw till 4. I do fruit till noon. And I intermittent fast because, we can go into this if you want to, but I intermittent fast like from 1:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m., right? That's what works great for me. So because I like to load up on fruit early in the day, I do fruit till noon, and then I'm doing like my salads, and I'll incorporate, in terms of cooked food, I may incorporate like a chickpea pasta or beans. I have a lot of beans like chickpeas, lentils, and things of that nature. And I know we're going to talk about a summit that I'm working on. One of the guests we have on the summit is Doug Evans, who wrote the Sprout book. And now I'm really into now these bean sprouts, and incorporating more of those. Like his story about how he's getting so many calories from these bean sprouts is really interesting to me. So even I'm on my own journey of cutting down even some of these foods, just because I see I can get it, from a place that has even more nourishment. Because the whole point of eating raw is to get the most nutritional value per calorie possible, right? We're going for nutrient density. And when you cook food, you lose some vitamins and mostly you lose some enzymes. And enzymes are super important because they're necessary for every metabolic function that your body does, right? So like right now we're sitting here talking, there are things going on in our body that we are not even thinking about. We're not doing anything special to make sure it happens. One of that is digestion of food, respiratory function, just the brain, and our brains in particular, they're the hungriest organ of the body, consuming the majority of our calories. It's the most metabolically hungry organ. Getting the most optimal nutrition and all of these enzymes is super important just for our overall health. And for me in particular, what keeps me on it, right? Because I love food. I'm a foodie just like most Americans. I can eat all day, but I have a history of acid reflux. And early on, like I'll never forget. So I went to NYU, and in the first year, as part of their core curriculum, there's a human genetics class that we have to take. My professor mentioned to me that his friend used to pop back Pepto-Bismol like it was water, because he suffered from really bad acid reflux. And turns out, because he didn't take care of the problem and just kept drinking the Pepto-Bismol, he had developed esophageal cancer and had to half of his esophagus removed and his stomach moved up all the way to his chest. This scared me tremendously. When I learned about raw foods and I physically felt for myself how much easier it was to digest food without any acid coming back up, without food feeling stuck up here, I was convinced, and it's helped keep me on. Like when I don't eat enough greens, like if I'm having beans, let's say, even without oil, because I don't cook with oil, I can only handle so much beans without greens and not get digestive upset, right? So in order for me to digest the beans, I need the greens. Why? Because the greens have the enzymes that I don't have. We actually start losing enzymes at age 30, and it just gets, harder and harder from there. So folks who are eating a lot of cooked foods, especially foods laced with oil and some of these other stuff, these heavier, fattier foods, they need a lot of enzymes to digest it so the body can actually utilize it, break it down. And so they're having, some of these issues. And that's, also what I help my clients with on their journey. A lot of them come to me looking to release excess fat and alleviate some of these issues that are coming up. And raw foods is the easiest way to do all of it, right? Raw foods, because it's so rich in water, because it's rich in nutrients and rich in fiber, it's very easy to get excess fat off the body.
Absolutely. And I'm curious about this because I've seen studies that show like, look, going and eating a raw vegan diet is phenomenal for weight loss. It's almost as if your body melts. All of that excess fat just boom, it goes away. Mm-hmm. But at what point though do you try to reintroduce some of that fat and calories to make sure that you don't go from being overweight to an unhealthy person who's underweight at that point, right? You've almost lost too much weight. There's studies that show that a lot of people who eat that raw diet actually wind up in that camp. How do you strike that balance?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. Thank you for that. I actually have a challenge, a 30-day raw vegan challenge that goes into this. There's a lesson on how to lose excess fat and how to gain weight. The funny thing is, I have never had a problem of trying to gain. My family, we all trying to lose, right? But I've had people actually ask me over the years of coaching, how do I gain weight? And the great thing about eating our species specific diet, the food that we're meant to eat, it brings us to our healthy weight range. Now, when you look at those folks who have done raw foods and have ended up underweight, there's a lot of things that they are not paying attention to holistically. Any diet you go on, you really need to be intentional about making sure that you're eating correctly, right? Because you can mess up any kind of diet. So, one, making sure you're having enough calories. When I first went raw, this was a concern of mine too. I thought that I could, end up disappearing if I wasn't careful, which now I know is just, it's not possible. Not for someone like me who loves to eat. So, but I did count my calories in the beginning to see how much I was consuming. Folks who have a concern, specifically this tends to be on the skinny end. Definitely they come in, they start this journey with a lot of concern and fear that they'll lose too much weight. And I say actually calculate what your TDEE is, your total daily energy expenditure is. So you have that number. Count your calories in the beginning, track what you're eating in the beginning, and just make sure you're having enough. That's number one. Number two, all of us, regardless of the diet that we're eating, we need to be exercising, specifically lifting weights. We know based on science that our muscle mass, it's holding us up, right? It's holding our structure. Yes, we have the skeletal system going on, but the muscle is holding all of us up. As we age, we start to lose muscle mass. In order to maintain that, we need to be working out and building muscle. For folks who are underweight at any diet, you want to build muscle. For folks who are overweight, any diet, you want to build muscle. Muscle burns fat. Just always keeping that in mind. That's like the foundation for like a healthy, holistic lifestyle, making sure you're exercising. And it's not just doing cardio, but doing strength training, resistance training in our natural environment. Before we were on computers, sitting at desks and living sedentary lives, we were out working. Every time that we got food, we had to do work for that food. Our muscles were being worked. Our cardiovascular system was engaged, doing that labor. So our lifestyle right now is not really natural for us. So we just kind of have to make sure we fit this stuff in and maintain that on top of the diet. The diet does 80% of the work for folks that are on a weight loss journey, but that exercise piece is going to be critical for muscle development and maintenance, and also our brain health and our, just mental health, mood, energy, all of that.
Hey, look, let me tell you something. I mean, I'm 14 years into my whole weight loss journey now, and the further out I get, the more I realize the importance of exercise and strength training. And had I known what it is that you're talking about today a few years ago, I would have really prioritized that a little bit more in terms of trying to maintain a little bit more muscle mass as opposed to kind of playing catch up here down the line. But, it's all good. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. Like, I still feel like a gajillion times better.
Of course. And you have an amazing weight loss journey. I mean, kudos to you. All of that work that you did, a lot of it, the majority of it is mental, and that's what's going to help you with everything going forward, not just nutrition, but like everything in life, business, everything, So it's just an amazing journey. Also, I want to mention, like you were saying, it's never too late. Even if you're 60 something, 70 something, and you're listening to this and you feel like, oh, I've lost all this muscle, you can work on it now. And I really encourage you to work on it now. Even my mom, she's in her 70s now, and she is picking up weights and doing workouts every morning with the Seventh-day Adventists. They have like a channel on TV, where it's like 24/7. They have workouts every morning at 7 a.m. She's doing workouts with weights. And, because we've been talking a lot about sarcopenia and some of this other stuff, but it doesn't have to happen, even if you're in those later years,
I love you, Mom. Your mom is the coolest. I had such a great time getting to talk to her in New York. And I'm glad that you brought your family back into it, because I want to go back and ask you about your grandma again, because the kind of foods that you were talking about eating today, Clearly much different than even the doctor prescribed diet that your grandma went on toward the end there. And your mom became the de facto nutritionist. So we didn't get an opportunity to talk about what foods were being prescribed for her at that point. What did her diet look like?
Yeah, in the morning, I remember her having orange juice, a slice of bread. My mom, in those days, she used to make turkey sausages because, turkey is better than.
Has to be, right? Of course it is.
Oh, yeah, turkey bacon, waffles,
Oh, yeah.
the basically standard American diet. What she couldn't have was refined sugar, but even that, I mean, I feel like now we're more aware refined sugar is showing up in a lot of places, even places we would never expect to see them, Just like some of these bottled things that you like ketchup, for example. Why would there be refined sugar? And yes, there's cornstarch, high fructose corn syrup in ketchup. So, and this is another reason why I really love the raw food diet. A lot of these things you can make from the foods that you find at your local grocery store that don't have the oils, don't have the refined sugars, don't have the preservatives. A lot of these chemicals are obesogenic chemicals. So folks are like, why am I struggling to release this excess fat? I'm eating healthy. There's so many chemicals in our environment that we have to be aware of and get out of our diet and lifestyle in order for that excess fat to be released. The fat is holding on to the toxins, right? That's where the toxins are living. So this diet, it's just really cleansing.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. And I love the fact you just brought up something that's like super important too, is that when a person is just getting going on their health journeys and they're working toward their goal, like that starting line, that is a scary place to be. Because one of the thoughts that is so pervasive is, I will never be able to eat my favorite foods again. Whatever the food may be. It may be a Big Mac. It may be pizza. It may be chicken. It may be the waffles, whatever the case may be. There is that fear that comes with going on a diet. And so that, I think, Samantha, is why we also reward ourselves with those very foods that put us in a position to be unhealthy in the first place. And we just don't connect the dots. So how easy is it? Let's talk to the people who aren't really familiar with being raw vegan. How easy is it to kind of take those favorites that you've been eating your entire life? Maybe it's a generational recipe that's been passed down through the family for ages, and then make that now a raw vegan recipe so you can still enjoy that and get that taste of deliciousness that you've loved since you were knee-high to a grasshopper.
Yes, I love that. We were talking before about kielbasa, right? Which you said that you've had before, which is a Polish sausage. With my raw vegan store, we did our raw vegan take. You basically learn how to make a raw vegan sausage, which the base of it is walnuts and sun-dried tomatoes, right? With seasoning. So the seasoning we use is, we incorporated to some kind of our own spin on it with some Ethiopian spices, but the concept is the same. Like whatever you're used to in your cultural dish. For Jamaicans, it's jerk seasoning. We like cayenne pepper, those types of things. You take those same seasonings, you apply it to your raw vegan dishes. So for example, right now, I'm really into jackfruit. So I made a jackfruit wrap recently, wrapped in a nori roll with some vegetables, sprouts. I had added some beet sprouts and kale and some different things with a sauce that I made using some Cajun seasoning because I really love Cajun. I used to love Popeyes because of the Cajun seasoning that they did with the fries and stuff. So I still have that Cajun flavor and I can enjoy that Cajun taste. But now I'm just utilizing that spice on a different type of food, right? Same thing with like if you love brownies. One of the guests on the summit that I have coming up is Misfit Vegan. She has 100 recipes free. One of them includes a raw vegan brownie. And there's a lot of raw recipes out there. I'm pretty sure you could Google raw brownie, We've made in the store raw vegan apple pie, which just blows the McDonald's apple pie out of the water because you don't have to, worry about having any heartburn or acid reflux after. you know? It's all the nourishment and satisfaction without any of the guilt.
I would love to taste that apple pie. That sounds amazing. I haven't even thought about a McDonald's apple pie in forever. Man, yeah, those used to hit the spot. I'm not sure that my taste buds would agree today, but the memories are sure, nice to think about. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Is it hard though to cook raw? Like is it kind of learning a new way of cooking? So it's like you're kind of starting from scratch there as well?
You're not gonna start from scratch because you already know the spices you like, right? So typically in the beginning when I'm working with someone, I'm like, okay, what are you eating now? What do you like? Is it garlic? Is it curry? Is it cayenne? Is it rosemary, right? These spices we just incorporate to new cuisines. And just like anything else, you pick up a book, you open the book, and you start playing around with the recipes. And first thing I want to say too is a lot of people are buying recipe books and they're not making the recipes. Like that's you need to make the recipes. Buying the book is not going to help you.
Why
You
would you
think it's
buy the
like
book if you're not going to do it?
it's like osmosis. It's gonna sit there, and then all of a sudden we're gonna be like chefs, right? But that we actually have to open it and make this stuff. That's number one. And I know for me in the beginning, I was really nervous, right? Because as a child, I was a baker. I was not a cook, right? I wasn't a chef. And I wanted everything to be tidy and perfect. And cooking sometimes can get messy. It's a science and an art. So just kind of relieve yourself of the perfectionism around it. It's okay to just follow the recipe. If it doesn't work out, that's all right. You just supported a farmer, you supported your local grocery store. Okay. If you don't like it, that's fine. But number one tip I would have is start with a recipe that has the majority of ingredients that you like. If there's one or two things you're not too sure of, that's fine. But if you see that you like most of the ingredients, at the end of the day, even if it doesn't come out exactly as you see in the picture or whatever, you're going to enjoy that meal, right? That's number one. Number two, other than, making sure you pick up the book and actually make the recipes, where folks kind of make this a little bit more confusing than it needs to be is they get too much involved with the raw gourmet where folks are, trying to make raw pizzas and they're putting in the crust in a dehydrator and waiting 18, 20 hours. I don't know about you, but I don't have time for that. I'm a busy professional. And if I'm hungry right now today, I'm not waiting 20 hours for my meal, number one. Number
Testify.
two,
Testify.
number two, if I want it today, right now, I don't know if I'm gonna want it 20 hours from now. Like I am the raw food meal planner, but I the way I plan is based on like groups. So like I know I'm gonna eat fruit every day. I make sure I have fruit stocked. I plan to have fruit every day, right? But if I'm not gonna want pizza today and then wait for tomorrow to eat it. Like that just, it doesn't make sense to me personally. Now, for folks who really are into that, definitely experiment, play around, all that stuff. I wouldn't recommend starting there. It's not, and even that way of eating is not something you want to make the majority of your meals because they tend to be high in fat. And even on a raw diet, when you do high fat, you can end up feeling really sluggish, right? Some folks can metabolize it a lot better than others. But for the majority of us, that's not where the majority of your calories are going to come from. So, and they tend to be more complex. So that's not where you start. Where you start is it could be like how I started. I started with green smoothies. Then I started eating more salads, and the salad was an add-on. Right. So back in the day when I first started, I feel like Fully Raw Christina was definitely, she had a YouTube channel at that point. And I remember her talking about eating a pound of greens a day. And I was like, oh, that sounds really healthy. Let me try and do that. Right. And so that's what I did. I didn't replace anything. I added on the pound of greens to whatever I was having. Those greens fill you up and your palate changes, your gut microbiome changes. So the microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, send neurotransmitters, which are basically like messages to the brain that tell you what to crave, what to want. So the more greens you start to eat, you actually start to crave those greens. I went from not liking avocado, but honestly, I never had it. I just assumed I wouldn't like it because it was green. To now, I love avocado. Avocado is bomb. Like, this is, it's like one of the best foods out there. Kale, I can eat kale without anything on it. This was not me. I didn't like vegetables at the start of this journey, right? So your palate will evolve and you will become just a new person. Like, really, scientifically, cellularly, you become a new person because our cells are dying off every day, and what we eat is what we become. So you just start where you are, start with the easy thing first and take it step by step.
God, you're so funny about those pizzas, right? Nobody's going to plan 18 hours. Nobody's going to wait, like 20 hours to make their own pizza, or surely never waited 18 to 20 hours for a Domino's delivery either.
You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody got time for that.
No, not a chance, man. But I will tell you this, though. If somebody did invest the time in that 20-hour pizza, the way that the body would react to that in terms of inflammation is vastly different than that 30-minute pizza delivery from your local pizza chain, right? So let's talk about the anti-inflammatory benefits that come with eating that raw vegan diet, specifically there. I mean, how is the body going to react differently with that raw pizza versus the Domino's delivery?
Yes, and really because of the ingredients that you're using in the raw pizza is all whole foods, all clean, right? So as opposed to like wheat, which is in a traditional pizza that has gluten, a lot of people are allergic to gluten or gluten intolerant. Gluten specifically can be very triggering. Now, for something like a raw pizza, typically the crust is made of like nuts or seeds. If you have a nut allergy or some kind of seed allergy, right? These are things to keep in mind. Even on this diet, we have to be mindful of foods that we may not be able to tolerate at the moment. This is one of the things that I also work through with clients because they feel like, oh, I can't have this thing. But thankfully, we have really smart gastroenterologists like Dr. Will be talking about, no, go low and slow, right? We don't have to eliminate necessarily, but we have to be mindful of quantities. And so for being mindful of quantities, we're not in a position to start with something like a raw vegan pizza that's calling for maybe like a whole cup or two of nuts, seeds, whatever, right? So we just kind of have to be mindful of that. But yeah, everything in a raw vegan pizza, raw vegan pie, all of these things are whole foods, minimal oil. Sometimes oil is being used and it's cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, so it's not heated, right? Because raw means the food has not been heated beyond 118 degrees. We know that once we heat the food beyond 118 degrees, we lose enzymes and we lose some vitamins. Enzymes in particular are really heat sensitive. So yeah, and it's because of this why all of these foods, for the most part, for most people, tend to be anti-inflammatory. Usually when folks have issues with inflammation, we're looking at grains, we're looking at oil, and we're looking at meat and dairy as being issues, sources of inflammation, which are, you're not going to find that on a raw vegan diet.
No question about it. How would one go about eating something like beans and even certain grains on a raw vegan diet? Because I can't see anybody just like, biting down on a raw, uncooked bean. I mean, they're going to chip their teeth, and it's really, from a digestive standpoint, not the smartest idea in the world either. So when it comes to the raw vegan diet, how does somebody who's unfamiliar incorporate those types of things into their day-to-day plate?
Yeah, it's funny you say that about beans because I just had for dinner today sprouted garbanzo beans. So they were not cooked, they were just sprouted, which means they were soaked. They have the little tail coming out of them. They definitely taste a lot different.
Could you make hummus out of them still then?
You can make hummus. You can make even some Indian curries and things like this. So like I was saying earlier, one of the speakers on the summit that we have coming up is Doug Evans, the author of the Sprout book. And I highly recommend that book. It comes with recipes and like all the different ways you use sprouts, all the different sprouts that are out there. And, a lot of the calories that he particularly gets is coming from these sprouted beans. So it is feasible, it's doable. And actually because beans and nuts and seeds have this protective coating over them that can disrupt our intestinal lining and cause sensitivity, food intolerance, and things like this. It's advised that we soak them overnight. So even, in the cooked plant-based, whole food plant-based community, anytime you're working with garbanzo beans, for example, you soak it overnight, at least 8 hours. You throw off that water, right? And then rinse that and then cook that, right? So you mitigate any issues of digestive upset. Now with the sprouted beans, it's sprouted, so you get that same kind of benefit. And in terms of like the texture, it's not as soft as a cooked bean, but it's not as hard as just a dry bean, right? So it is edible, it's chewable, but it definitely tastes almost like wheatgrass. It tastes like wheatgrass if you just add it to a salad, which is what I did. I just added it to a salad. But there are levels to this. Some of us don't mind the wheatgrass flavor taste.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, I'm not sure that that's really going to get somebody excited, Samantha. I'm just going to be honest with you.
But you don't have to eat that much. Like I've heard him say that, he throws some nutritional yeast on the sprouted garbanzo beans and eats that like popcorn. Now the idea is a really interesting one, but I think that it will be an acquired taste. To start with though, yeah, making something like a hummus is really great. And he has some other recipes, some like Indian ones. Really the whole thing is like you add the spices that you like and that you're used to. You can make anything taste like anything you want.
There it is. It's all about the spice. It always comes back to the spice. You've mentioned the summit that you've got coming up here, the Thrive Through Food Summit. So what are you going to be talking about other than the benefits of eating a raw vegan diet? What you got there?
Oh, well, we're talking about a lot more than that. I didn't really start off to have it be, talking about really the benefits of a raw diet. The goal was to showcase how much nutrition plays a role in mental health and specifically anxiety and depression, because I was hearing feedback from my local community. It doesn't make sense to talk about this when we're, like specifically with a local nonprofit that's working on addiction recovery with young men. The families don't really see why nutrition should be added to this because they don't feel like it's necessary. So I really wanted this summit to kind of be the answer to that, to let folks know, I know we're not talking about this a lot, clearly not enough, how much diet plays a role in our mental health. And so that was really the focus. I've interviewed everyone so far. And yes, a lot of arrows are pointing to raw foods, but a specific way of doing the raw food diet. Like I said, in the plant world, there's a lot of ways to eat. In the raw food world, there's a lot of ways to eat in there. And so you'll get to learn more about that on the summit. It's called the Thrive Through Food Summit. And yeah, we have like close to 30 speakers all talking about nutrition's role on mental health, anxiety, depression, autism, bipolar, ADHD, stress, lots of stuff. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then Dr. Baxter Montgomery is opening us up talking about cardiovascular health, because if your cardiovascular health is compromised, the blood flow to the brain is compromised, in which case the brain is not getting the nutrients it needs. And if the brain is compromised, that doesn't just mean that your cognitive abilities in terms of being able to recall information is hindered, but also your mood. So this is really important for me in particular because, I've spent the last few years working with nonprofits in the community development space, and there are folks doing great work who are under a lot of stress burden. And stress burden can come from many different ways. There's psychological stress, but there's also physical stress, environmental toxins causing stress. And some of that is the foods that we're eating, right? That's impacting the brain and affecting our patients' resilience, how we're showing up in community, how we are interacting with our family members, people we love. I've seen this show up even in my own family, where folks were once very loving, and through chronic illness and that overload of stress on the body from the chronic illness, from the toxins of medication, from the toxins from unhealthy food, now become irritable and aggressive with folks that I know they love, right? But there's a breakdown happening here. And so that's the connection that, I'm hoping folks really get from this summit, and hopefully folks can fine tune for themselves or do some self-reflection and see how they're showing up, especially for us leaders in the health and wellness community, right? If you're passionate about healthy eating, how you show up is really major. It's not just about you telling folks about food, because people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel, right? The presence that you bring into a room is what stays with people. And so if we can fix our minds so that we can have more patience, more resilience, and just speak love and be love, for folks, have the capacity for that, then I feel like it would have a bigger impact on all the work that we're trying to do. Because there's a lot of folks out here doing amazing work, trying to bring healing to community. But yes, we need to really focus on nurturing our brains.
Yeah, I agree. And, I can't tell you how differently I feel my mind operates eating this way compared to what I used to back in the day. I mean, night and day difference. I'm not saying every day is a good day. I'm not sure of anybody who has a great day 100% of the days, but certainly just overall mental clarity, mental health, less depression, more happiness, just like there's just so much there. And simplistically, I've always wondered, well, is it just because I feel better about myself and I've done something that I thought was really hard and now it's like I've proven that it's not impossible? Or is there something going on a more cellular level? And I think it's kind of a combination of both. And I find that science to be absolutely riveting. It is fascinating stuff. And clearly, listening to you talk about it, you share that same passion.
Yes, I heard a story that really wowed me with a couple that was on the brink of divorce. The wife was saying her husband was a complete jerk, and they went to like a few different counselors. They all got fired by these therapists and ended up at a clinic where the husband was asked, and the husband and wife, they're going together, and they're asked, is the husband drinking alcohol? Is he on drugs? And really being pressed about this, because sometimes folks lie when they're under addiction and they have these unhealthy habits. But a brain scan was done, and it showed the brain showed that it looked like this person was knocking back tons of alcohol. Come to find out that the husband's aggressive behavior started when he was working at a factory, with some kind of furniture factory, where they're dealing with chemicals, and these chemicals that he was inhaling was having a huge effect on the brain and stopping blood flow into major areas of the brain. That's what was causing his aggressive behavior at home with his wife, where they were almost on the brink of divorce. It was only because they didn't want to divorce why they kept searching for the right counselors to help them, right? And so I feel like if more people knew about this, right, you wouldn't at first glance say this is food related, right? And in his case, it wasn't necessarily, but this same type of impact can come from food. Alcohol, which is why I'm a huge, advocate for just let's get rid of it. It has no healthful benefit whatsoever. And the impacts to community is so great. Most of the stuff that we have rotating on the news, we wouldn't have if they would eliminate alcohol from circulation, which I know they tried that already. I've already gotten to a debate with folks who listen to my podcast and watch my YouTube channel, but I will still stay on that soapbox to get rid of alcohol. But, this absorbing toxins through the foods that we consume, and that's really the message, right? That when we show up in community and things are not right, and we're just saying, oh, it's because we're stressed or whatever, that stress actually could be something physical, and it could be the physical from food. But on the summit, we're diving into all the elements of how that shows up. You mentioned something about if it's something cellular, if it's just, I feel good about myself. We talk about all of that. What's happening on a cellular level when you start to eat these foods, the gut-brain axis, the vagus nerve, how the gut is talking to the brain, and metabolic health. And that's the role that exercise plays, that comes into, because we're a whole being, we're a whole body. All of this stuff matters. And if we were living in our natural environments, it wouldn't even be a conversation. We would naturally be doing these things, but we're very much disconnected. And so we have to be reminded.
I'm telling you, we could all use a reminder, couldn't we? My goodness. I tell you what, I have really enjoyed speaking with you, and I love the fact that you have Dr. Montgomery opening up the summit there. I'm privileged enough to be speaking as well. Just out of curiosity, how did Dr. M first pop up on your radar?
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes, let me tell you about that. I attended a plantation project webinar, and Dr. Baxter was on a panel talking about how he is, not just incorporating lifestyle medicine, but also how he is able to do this in a sustainable fashion that doctors struggle with a lot, right? And, I won't get into the weeds of that, but there's a whole business, right? This whole world, even I could go into how food and the whole economics of food has us eating way more than we should. But, and you may get some of those insights and ahas on the summit. But yeah, it was that panel that he was on talking about what he's doing. He's like, I'm telling folks to eat this way, but they're having trouble doing it at home. So I put in a restaurant. You can't work out. All right, I put in a gym. He's just making everything available. I'm like, look at this boss out here, making things easy for people. And then recording it, doing studies, submitting that to NIH. This is super important because I know in my community, there are pockets of people who have been doing raw foods and talking about raw foods for a long time. I have folks on the summit who've been talking about and living a raw food lifestyle for over 50 years, 60 years, you know what I'm saying? Talking about this, but the medical establishment has not been talking about this, has not been talking about all of the healing properties that raw foods has to offer. Dr. Baxter is bringing them into the fold, which I think could be a huge game changer, right? So, and then, yeah, his whole series, Heart of a Champion, brilliant.
Oh, wasn't that so good? Wasn't that so good? I mean,
Yes.
and like that's another one that just kind of like broke down those barriers between, being macho and eating steaks and like, burgers for days and, just like standard American diet because that's what the men eat. So he's got like all of these famous football players, like really high level athletes that he's working with that are eating a plant-based diet, leading by example. And you saw the turnaround that they had with their health. Just remarkable stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Loved it.
And I love the focus area because that demographic in particular, they tend to not lean in on the health information. It's usually more women that are leaning in, the women dragging them to eat more vegetables. I know in my parents' household, it's my mom that, jumped on board really fast. And because she makes all the food, my dad by default is eating high plant-based. But when he's not at home and traveling, he's sneaking and eating whatever it is he wants to eat, but
what you gonna do?
This is why men who are married live longer.
Ooh.
Because you need to have women in your life. They will make sure you stay healthy. That's it.
That's the
This is
secret to
backed by
longevity,
science.
fellas. That's funny.
Seriously.
That's funny. That is why men who are married live longer. Because the woman is going to take care of you. She's going to drag you into that healthier direction, whether you want to go or not. You may be kicking, you may be screaming. There may be a game on TV, but damn it, you're going to eat something raw vegan tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Buffalo cauliflower. That's what you have in with the game.
Well, hold on. Now, look. I mean, those cauliflower wings can be killer. Oh, my
Seriously.
goodness. Yo, those things are so good. So good. So we'll do a whole other hour just on the cauliflower wings. I mean, they're just
What? I'm down for it.
tasty.
Yes, and there's a stir fry, a raw vegan stir fry you could do with cauliflower rice. So many things you could do with cauliflower.
Well, I know that you are a creative genius in the kitchen, but still, like the rest of us, do not have 20 hours to wait for pizza. Right. So I got you. So here's the deal. Thrive Through Food Summit. Check that out. Coming up, we got a link to that down below. Also, rawfoodmealplanner.com. That's where you go. Get in touch with Samantha Salmon. And it has just been, Samantha, a true joy chatting with you today. Please give your mom my absolute best. And let's do this again very soon.
She watches you all the time. She said to tell you hi and give you a hug. So here's your virtual hug.
Hug from mama right back.
Yes. And I love everything Dr. Baxter's doing. Shout out to him and the whole community. Everyone in his community is so wise and on top of their numbers. It's the best community to be a part of if you're serious about getting healthy. So definitely endorse his community.
2 thumbs up. And that means like and subscribe if you're watching this video right now. Samantha Salmon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you got value out of this video, please like it, subscribe, and hit the notification button